Perfect. Well, welcome everybody. We're currently in our lobby 38 attendees. We have 72 that have registered to participate in this. Just to kind of get this started, we are here for the WDFW's Motorized Rule Project. We are currently have only filed a CR 101 in this, but we are planning on potentially filing a CR 102 in the next month or so. In the chat, I will be placing a link to our rulemaking page so you can kind of see the status. And of course, submit any public comment to our CR 101s or CR 102 when those links are available. And of course, if you have any additional questions, I will have a few housekeeping rules for this. My participants in the lobby, please note that we're going to hold our questions until the end. When it is time for open question, I will ask you to raise your hand or have your hand raised, and then I will unmute you for you to speak. You may use the chat, but again, those questions are not going to be answered until the end. We're going to let our panelists speak through their presentation and get the information to you. All right. I'm your host for this meeting. My name is Jamie Lee. I work with the rules coordinator. Scott Bird is our WDFW's rules coordinator for the agency. You will see his name on all the documents. So we are a team in this, and here we go. I'm going to pass it off to Ken Connolly. Go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you, Jamie. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kevin Connolly. I'm the Lands Division Manager of WDFW's Wildlife Program. I want to thank you for taking the time to learn more about what we're proposing related to access and motorized use on our WDFW managed lands all across the state. So you may be aware that WDFW's Lands Division manages over 1 million acres across 33 wildlife areas, and we manage lands in every one of the state's counties. By last count, we host somewhere between 35 to 45 billion dollars, 45 to 45 billion visitors to our wildlife areas and water access areas each year, and that generates more than $1.4 billion in economic impacts to local communities. We own and manage lands specifically to meet WDFW's mission to maintain or enhance ecological integrity and to provide access to wildlife-related recreation opportunities. Our data shows that more than 90% of Washingtonians recreate outside, according to the state of Washington's 2022 Outdoor Assessment of Recreation Demand Report. Outdoor recreation is a driving force in our economy. We create jobs and build rural businesses throughout the state. Recently, Washington's Recreation and Conservation Office has estimated that $25.2 billion is spent on outdoor recreation trips and equipment across the state. We support more than 237,000 jobs, and we contribute more than $5 billion in local and state tax revenue. That's more than 3.2% of the entire state's GDP. For WDFW, be aware that there are more than 2,000 miles of roads on our wildlife areas. Some are maintained. Many of those are old ranch roads that may or may not be maintained, and they're found in all states of repair. There are roads and trails that are eroding. Some are causing damage to surrounding fish and wildlife habitats that we're responsible for managing. Others that can actually be dangerous. This last hunting season, we actually had several hunters that got stuck or broke their vehicles in remote areas on our wildlife areas. We also regularly acquire new lands, so our network of roads is continually expanding. We are actively working to map and assess the condition of the roads and trails on our existing and our newly acquired lands. In 2022, we completed a 10-year recreation strategy that guides our efforts to enhance recreation opportunities on DFW managed lands while also protecting the natural, cultural, and tribal resources that we're responsible for. One of the goals identified in that plan was development of a sustainable travel management program to address the designation, development, decommissioning where appropriate, maintenance, and monitoring of roads and trails on WDFW managed lands. Today's town hall is being provided to share information about the first step in that travel management program. I want to take just a brief moment to introduce the rest of the team joining me on the town hall today, including Captain Mike Jewell from our WDFW Enforcement Program, Assistant Regional Program Manager Rich Finger, Planner Heidi Anderson, and our Planning and Recreation Management Section Manager Joel Sisolak. We're here today to share background about our proposed rulemaking related to motorized recreational uses on DFW's managed lands, to present a proposed WAC language, and also to gather your input. We provided a briefing already for the DFW Commission during last month's Habitat Committee meeting, and this is another opportunity for us to share this information with interested parties in the public. I want to clarify, as Jamie already mentioned, that the CR2 for this proposed rule has not yet been published, but we expect to publish that over the next several weeks. And with that not very brief intro, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Captain Jewell so he can describe some of the challenges with managing motorized vehicle use under the current regulations on our lands. Captain Jewell?
Yes, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. As you heard, I'm Mike Jewell. I'm the captain for Region 2, which is our North Central Washington region. And we're one of two regions on the east side that have probably the most WDFW owned or managed lands within them. And as you've already heard, our lands are becoming increasingly popular for a variety of outdoor recreation. And as use increases, so do the impacts to the resources, and in particular from vehicles. But my goal here is to represent the law enforcement perspective. It's important for us and for citizens, the public of Washington, that laws and regulations are not only clear, but easy to follow. This helps the public understand what is allowed and what may not be allowed while they're out recreating on our lands. But it's also important that regulations can be enforced for those who may choose not to follow them. As everybody here knows, laws without enforcement are just merely suggestions. Historically, when it comes to managing vehicle use on our lands, we've done that through posted regulations. As you can imagine, this isn't always very effective because unfortunately, when someone decides they want to violate a rule or a regulation, they just simply remove the sign that states that it's unlawful. Not only does this create confusion for others who may come along and don't know that that sign is missing, it also is costly for the department and it inhibits our ability to enforce the law. So hopefully what you'll see from the presentation today is that this proposal disincentivizes the removal of signs and also provides a lot more clarity regarding where and what types of vehicles can be operated on WDFW lands. Within law enforcement, our primary goal is always to provide education and information, but it's also necessary to ensure compliance and that the laws and regulations that we do have are enforceable. So I appreciate everybody being here today. That's just a little bit of the perspective from the law enforcement division. And with that, I'd like to kick it over to Chad Edson, who's the Columbia Basin Wildlife Area Manager, to give a little bit of perspective on the land management issues.
Thanks, Captain Jewell. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Chad Edson. I'm the Wildlife Area Manager for WDFW here in Region 2, the Columbia Basin Wildlife Area, so North Central Washington out of Moses Lake. As Wildlife Area Manager, we are charged with managing all activities on WDFW managed lands. And one of our biggest hurdles in the Columbia Basin is roads. We have, hundreds of miles of roads. Many of them are undesignated, user created. Some are illegal, some go places, some don't go places. Essentially, we have no way of getting a handle through the current method of signage to get a handle around the concept of roads and regulating roads. We also have no good way of providing outreach and maps to the public on what roads are open and what roads are closed when signs disappear quickly. So through this process of working on this, we're really looking to, from my perspective on the ground, close the roads that shouldn't belong there and really stop the creation of new roads. Right now, there's nothing preventing roads from occurring on the Columbia Basin where we have very limited topography. You can simply drive off the road and two tracks make a brand new road. Folks follow that, and the next thing you know, we have a brand new road. And then people want to know where they can go. We thought there's one road out there. The next thing we know, there's three roads. We can't really provide that outreach to the public. So from the wildlife area perspective, I think this is really an effort that will allow us to get a handle on what we have and a starting point for roads. I don't think there will be a big shift in where folks are normally driving. Those roads are going to remain open on our wildlife area, but we'll be really able to message where roads are and provide some outreach to the folks that are looking to go recreate on the wildlife area responsibly. It's also going to allow us to protect the resource. Currently, roads are creating resource damage in some of our areas, and that's something that we really need more tools to be able to handle and deal with. So I'm really looking forward to this effort. I think I'm supposed to turn over to Heidi.
Yeah, thanks to all of you. You guys gave a great, succinct introduction to the presentation. And I apologize to those in the audience that I am going to basically take what they said and kind of carve it, explain to you the sausage making kind of behind it. And so there are a lot of words on my slides, and I'm going to basically go against anything I've ever been taught for PowerPoints. But this is a rule-making exercise. This is a rule-making meeting. So hopefully you knew that when you decided to join us. Okay, I'm going to try to share here. Okay, is everybody seeing it okay?
Good, Heidi.
Yeah. Okay, so again, the focus of this is our rulemaking effort for motorized recreation on department lands. And I am Heidi Anderson. I'm a recreation planner for WDFW. I'm a recreation planner that works in the planning and recreation section, and we're in the lands division under the wildlife program. So I work out of Olympia, and this photo on the opening slide is the Columbia Basin. So it does kind of show, what Chad was talking about, especially when we've got these landscapes where, it's really easy to kind of go off of the main tracks and create roads really quickly. Let's see. All right, what is the purpose of this proposed rulemaking effort, and how is this going to be achieved? So basically, instead of coming up with a brand new shiny whack, we decided that instead we would do this process through amending two existing WACs. And that will make it more clear for our law enforcement officers, also more clear for our visitors and users and constituents. So the two WACs that we will be modifying will be 220 500 080. It's going to be modernizing that WAC, basically to be more specific about what and where motorized vehicles can be driven on DFW lands. And then WAC 220 500 020 are definitions. And some of the language that we're going to be using in the 080 WAC relies on terms that we haven't defined in the past. And we're also using terms that we want to kind of expand upon so that this rule is more effective. And this was kind of interesting to me that back in 1966 we did actually have a WAC that basically made it unlawful to operate a motor-driven vehicle on any lands except where there were well-defined existing roads. So, ironically, that's more specific than what we have on the books right now. So, but from that, I'm first of all going to show you and read you what our existing WAC 220 500 080 says. This is vehicles using department lands. So right now, our WAC says it is unlawful to operate a motor-driven vehicle on a road controlled or managed by the department pursuant to road management agreement in a manner or for a purpose contrary to posted signs or notices except as authorized by the director. So I don't know about you, but this is something that would appear to be pretty confusing for me. So this is the way we will be amending that WAC to read. It will be motorized recreation on department lands. It will say it is unlawful to operate a motorized vehicle on department lands except on roads or trails or in areas specifically designated and posted open for these uses. These vehicles include highway vehicles, off-road vehicles, electric assisted bicycles, snowmobiles, and other devices assisted or propelled by an internal combustion engine or electric power. And then we have exceptions. So we have the exception if it's under express written permission from the director or appointed authority, official use by department staff, and then use by fire, military, law enforcement for emergency purposes, and then anything that is authorized by a legal right of way or an easement. Okay, and then moving on to the definitions WAC and some of the changes that we'll be making to that in order to move ahead with this rulemaking. So department lands, this definition is being expanded, and that's shown by the dark green in this on this slide. So department lands means any department managed lands or waters owned or administered by the department, including wildlife areas, access areas, the hatcheries or game farms, and certain city, county, state, federal, and private lands that are managed by DFW. So, and so then these are two important terms that we have needed to define. One is designated. So designated will mean any area, site, facility, entrance, road, trail, or other features specified for the department by the department for permitted, restricted, or prohibited use. Posted means information displayed by the department or other party authorized by contract or written agreement with the department that is reasonably ascertainable to the public on any sign, information board, kiosk, website, map, publication, or other medium that permits, restricts, or prohibits access to or activities on department lands. And this one is really important because right now, as Captain Jewell talked about, posted literally means it's a sign posted in the ground on the site, and that's where you get your information from. So if that sign has been taken down or destroyed or whatever, then that, the wayfinding, ways that people can figure out where they are and what's allowed, that basically kind of goes away. So this allows us to have authorized maps on our web page, to have kiosks at key locations, and to make this information much more available to the public, for your recreational use and awareness. So what was the original rule and how is this proposed rule different? So basically, the existing rule prohibits motor-driven vehicle use on roads in a manner contrary to posted signs. So that was it. And this new proposed rule is going to cover not only motor-driven, but motor-assisted vehicles and devices. And it's going to establish a framework where routes or areas are closed to motorized use unless they're specifically both designated and posted as open. So this is kind of where we're hoping that the way this rule is written, it will adapt to the times with increasing technology or developing technology. And it also sets it up so there's a deliberate process, by the department to evaluate, those roads that should be open and for which approved uses. So which types of vehicles are covered by this proposed rule? highway vehicles and off-road vehicles are probably more obvious, but we did decide, and this went through a lot of process internally with DFW and our interdisciplinary teams. But we are specifically calling out, in addition, electric assisted bicycles, snowmobiles, and other devices assisted or propelled by an internal combustion engine or electric power. So again, this can address current and emerging motorized recreational devices. And I think it's important to note with snowmobiles that the inclusion of snowmobiles is one of the reasons why the WAC does say on roads or trails or in areas, because it doesn't mean that snowmobiles will have to stay on a road or trail. But we have the ability then to draw a boundary, like a polygon around an area that snowmobiles, could possibly travel. And that area could be as large as a wildlife area unit. So that's how we came up with that. What does designated mean under the proposed rule, and how is a road or trail going to get designated? So again, it's permitted. It's for the department. It means that has been permitted, restricted, or prohibited deliberately and through a process. And that process is a travel management planning process. And this will, among other things, consider natural, cultural, and tribal resources and their impacts, public safety, and existing legal access. So it will be a very deliberate process for each of our wildlife areas where we have roads and trails, and these uses are part of the experience on the wildlife areas. And the travel management planning processes right now, those are ongoing on a number of the wildlife areas where we have significant motorized vehicle use. We have the Met-How is underway right now, and so is the Cowlitz. And then we have also started on the Weenus and the LT Murray. So we're doing travel management planning on all of those areas. And we also will be doing designations on other areas in a temporary way until the travel management planning process can officially occur as part of our wildlife area management planning, so as to be able to post those designations. Yeah, and then you might wonder, how is the public going to know which routes are designated and posted open to the public? Um, and this means posted will mean the information is displayed by the department and is reasonably ascertainable to the public. So again, this is specifically through signs, kiosks, websites, maps, or any other authorized publications. And this little picture that's on here is our green dot road system map. And, really the green dot system is where we probably have the most motorized recreational roads. And it's a system where basically if there's a green dot on the road, then motorized use is allowed. And then where there isn't, it's theoretically not allowed. So it's kind of the concept of the green dot maps that we're applying to other wildlife areas and other even areas within wildlife areas that have a green dot system. So it's just kind of expanding that concept. So that's it. And with that, I will kind of turn it over back to Jamie to manage questions and hopefully answers.
All right, thank you so much, Heidi. Okay, at this time, I'm going to open it up to verbal comment. So if you would like to speak or ask a question, please raise your hand. All right, all right. I have Vince. I'm gonna turn you on to talk. Vince, can you hear me? It says you're on. I'll try one more time.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I
Okay.
can. Go
All right,
ahead.
there we go. All right. Yeah, so I'm kind of curious, I'm a snowmobiler, so I go, that's the main reason I'm on here today. And I know like at the beginning, the main reason that this is getting brought up is because vehicles are making, easily making new roads in the places you know, that aren't allowed. And so I'm kind of curious why snowmobiles are being included on this because we're not making a new road if we go off trail on a snowmobile, right? We're leaving very little to almost no sign of us ever being there. So I'm kind of curious why that's getting brought into it.
Um, Heidi, do you know who would be best to answer that?
Yeah, Captain Jewel, do you mind addressing that? And then I could also speak to it a bit.
I can certainly try. So, you're right. Typically, snowmobiles aren't the users that are out there creating new roads or new routes. But this particular proposal or the process we're working through is more than just about designated roads and trails, right? It's about where you can utilize any motorized recreation. And you can probably understand there are certain areas on lands that are either owned or managed by the Department of Fish and Wildlife where perhaps snowmobiles are not necessarily compatible with other resource impacts on that wildlife area. So it's not about, I think more directly to answer your question, it's snowmobiles are just another motorized use that's being included in this process as we evaluate what is and where is appropriate for motorized use. And I know, I don't know, but I sense some of the concern is, we're going to lose opportunity. And
Yeah.
that's not what this process is about. It's just about making sure that what use is occurring out there is managed appropriately for the wildlife area and for the public in general. So I hope that answers at least part of your question, and I'd turn it over to you, Heidi, if you have some additional thoughts on that. Looks like
Joel,
maybe
do you want to say something before I do?
Yeah, I mean, you might be about to say the same thing, but I appreciate the question. I think building on what Captain Jules said, one of the things that we're also concerned about is just protecting wildlife. And in a lot of cases, wildlife are the most vulnerable in the winter. And that's not in all places, then that's not all species. So this will be a very sort of targeted process, like Captain Joel is saying. There's one example that kind of comes to mind is, and this is actually, Heidi, you can speak to this probably better than I can, but one of the big decisions we made through a lot of public process out in the Methow this year was to close some areas to winter recreation to protect wintering mule deer because the mule deer are particularly vulnerable in the winter. They have really limited forage and they have really limited energy. So it's the time of the year where they need the most protection. So we did close some areas to a variety of uses. I think maybe some areas to snowmobiling. But even in that case where there's a particular species with a really strong case statement, we were really pretty surgical in how we went about the closure process, and it was done with a lot of input from the public. So it's not something that we ever would do lightly.
Yeah, no, thank you, Joel. I think I think both of you basically kind of answered in the way I would. The only thing I would add is that Region 3 is, an area like LT Murray, especially, it's an area where we've got a lot of snowmobile use, as I understand it. And so we've been talking a lot to our assistant, you know, uh, regional program manager about that use in those areas, and they recognize the historical use, and know those areas where they feel like that use is compatible with wildlife. So we'll be working really closely with them to have those areas mapped and to continue that historical use, allowing for that historical use where there is agreement that there isn't, impact to wildlife. But we just want to be very deliberate about where we do allow it and know that it's not going to have, significant impacts to wildlife or habitat, through fragmentation or compaction or the ability to change, dynamics of travel by wildlife and that sort of thing. So, and one other thing that I will add is that it's not just snowmobile recreation, but we are even, designating those areas where snowmobiles will be used to groom trails for non-motorized use for cross-country skiing and that type of thing. So, yeah.
Okay.
All right, Vince, do you have any other questions?
No, I think that was it.
Thank you so much. I'm going to mute you now. I'm going to move on to the next. Fred, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Fred Slyfield. I live in Ellensburg. I've been here for about 46 years in the county. I live at the bottom of the Clockham. Our family owns the 21 Ranch, which is at the bottom of the Clockham between it and the Park Creek area. I also manage about another 3,000 acres of private that adjoins our land, that's also intermixed with some state ownership. And I've also managed the Clockham Coffin family property up in the Elk Reserve on Clockham Pass. I've worked for that family now for 44 years, taking care of stuff up there. I fully support the clarification on these WACs. The Green Dot Road system has worked really well in Kittitas County for years. My previous work employment was with the Kittitas County Sheriff's Office. I spent 30 years with them running all our backcountry patrols and search and rescue operations. The one thing I've noticed over the years here, and I'm mostly speaking about the Clockham and Quillamene areas, is that the motorized use has dramatically increased over the years, and there just needs to be a handle gotten on some of this stuff. It's really gotten out of hand in a lot of places. The Quillamene area was purchased by the state, and from my understanding it was purchased for elk winter range. And the problem is these areas now have basically turned into an off-road vehicle park in the spring and summertime, and then you roll into hunting season and you've got people running everywhere. All you got to do is get on YouTube, and these off-road groups have glorified this area. You can find all sorts of drone footage and guys road rallying out there. I ran into a whole group of electric pickups coming over Clockham here last year. One day there was about 12 of them that had been up there running everything. Part of the issue with this is the impact of the vehicle use out there just pushes these elk and deer into the private. We've had substantial issues on our land and the neighboring farms around our area with the impact from these elk that have just imprinted on these areas. Just last weekend alone, we loaded up with about 500 head of elk onto private after the weekend. They just go where nobody's bothering them and stuff. The county commissioners here have just approved an off-road vehicle racetrack and RV storage for people to leave their recreational vehicles here. And this property is about a 2-minute drive into the Quillamene recreation area. We're just going to see nothing but more and more people impacting this stuff around here. and they're going to be promoting this racing and the hangers on and the crowds that it draws. People are going to get tired of looking at a bike track for a little bit, and they're going to want to go explore up in the hills. So it's just run more and more people out into your ground there. I just really wish and hope that you guys can get some good clarification on this, get these laws built that have some teeth to them. Like I said, the green dot system has worked very well in our county, I think, over the years. And there just needs to be something done to address the impact that these areas have been getting around here. So that's about all I have to say. So I appreciate the opportunity to be able to get on here and speak with everybody.
Thank you, Fred. Okay, I'm going to mute you now. We have 3 more hands up and 1 question in the chat currently. Nicole Phillips, can you speak?
I am here. Thank you so much. I'm Nicole Phillips. I'm the Washington State Director for the Pacific Northwest Four-Wheel Drive Association. And my question, number one, I just wanted to respond to Fred. I think you have an excellent point. However, I would encourage you to look at tourism dollars that are spent in areas on their way to and from recreating. They bring in a lot of dollars to these cities that might not get that. But my question for WDFW is, what specific data or studies demonstrate that current motorized use on existing roads is causing visual habitat degradation on those lands? I think I read that in your report, but I didn't see any hard data. So I'm wondering what you've collected.
I can start to answer that, and Kevin and Joel, you can feel free to jump in too. There's been a lot that has been collected in areas across the West, and that goes for different types of motorized use as well as mountain bike use, and it's well documented. So, the degree to which it's been specifically documented on our roads or in our wildlife areas, we're not relying on that information, but on things that have been, peer-reviewed scientific studies that have been done. And that was like our mule deer winter closure. That's definitely the case with that.
Have those findings been shared with the public as part of this rulemaking process? I did not see any cited documents for this.
We have not specifically shared studies as part of the rulemaking process now.
And I would say that, the rulemaking process is still fairly early on. So I appreciate the question. I think it's a question that Nicole would love to follow up with you about. I think, we have, as Heidi suggested, collected some studies that are from other places. And then on top of that, we do have just on the ground evidence of braiding and just certain, I think Chad can probably speak to this, just the impact, particularly in these places where it doesn't take much for a new road to be created. If it's traveled over a few times, just because of the sensitivity of the soil. And Chad, I'm going to lean on you for this a bit, but we see it on the ground. We haven't done a study on it, but it's out there. And then there is the study from other places, which we also lean on. But I would love to follow up with you, Nicole, if you're interested in that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to add, Nicole, that just in general, there's roads that aren't causing issues, but then there's roads or trails or off-road activity that's clearly causing erosion or, a hill climb where it's unauthorized. The next thing you know, the whole thing's noxious weeds, driving through wetlands. So, I mean, I think there's a a large gradient of the off-road travel, or, in this case, speaking for the Columbia Basin specifically, um, defining what a road is really a great start for us because, as I described earlier, one vehicle travels off the road, a second vehicle follows it, and all of a sudden it looks like a road, and now it's compacted. It's going to be there for years and years and years. Like that doesn't heal quickly. There's other landscapes where that heals quickly, and those tracks go away, and those impacts go away. But here in the basin, we lose that crust. We get soil erosion quickly, noxious weeds spread. So, I think there's clearly roads that, or trails or off-road activity that has caused an issue. There's some that's clearly not causing an issue, and there's a sort of a gradient in between. And working through a process of travel management, like Heidi alluded to, is really going to give us the opportunity to look at the ones that are causing issues, do what we can do about that, but then keep the ones that are not causing a problem open. That's not, the intent on the Columbia Basin is not to close all the roads by any means.
Nicole, does that?
Yeah, so the answer to the question was it doesn't really exist. And I would just like to follow up with the Pacific Northwest four-wheel drive we're always open to discussion. So please reach out, or, I think we have your information as well. I do some calls with Heidi during the week on specific calls. So thank you for the platform to ask the question.
Thank you, Nicole.
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay, so just for time purposes, we have a few more hands, and a question. We're going to go in order, and then hopefully we can get through all of it. So next on there is Brian Cook. Brian C., can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. I'm a resident of Kittitas County, Ellensburg. I live outside of town. Like Fred, I've been here 60 plus years, and I've watched exponential growth from visitors from other areas to our county, just like you guys have witnessed everywhere that you've been talking about and everywhere you go. The growth, like Fred was talking about, once we get a racetrack down in the Quillamine area, like he said, it will expand as people move out. And tourism dollars are one thing. However, damage to the environment just does not get replaced and healed quickly and easily. So I'm all for management. However, I get very concerned and I get upset when I see data that is not appropriate and was used improperly by the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife back when they did a Clockham study and were trying to limit access to the Cook Canyon, Clockham areas. And you guys literally got in some hot water. You spent 2 hours at Central Washington University a few years ago, like 15 or 18 years ago, describing stressed elk, liver problems with elk, and every potential problem an elk could have health-wise. And you used as an example 17 vehicles that had reached or had gone up through the Cook Canyon area because you guys had cameras up there. And the data I'm concerned about is being misrepresented and misused to close and limit access to public lands. And so I'm extremely concerned about that. And I would love a follow-up call regarding that. I've talked to BLM about their proposals when they're working on their areas over here on the east side, when they were going to lock down any camping, any potential overnight stays if it was not in a designated campsite area, and there isn't any between Ellensburg and Yakima. These broad-based statements I get extremely concerned about. I'm a snowmobiler. I'm a four-wheel drive person. I go all over the West Coast using four-wheel drives and snowmobiles, and I'm extremely concerned about essentially, lack of better choice of words, locking down the hills to snowmobilers when there's specific areas like the Clockham elk area, places like that where snowmobilers don't bother the elk. And in my 40 years of riding snowmobiles, I've seen 2 elk and a couple of deer when you unload off your sled or offload off your timber sled, in the morning when you take off. And the impact, unless you're in an area with very low snowfall, just isn't there. And to watch these areas get potentially closed because someone with a stroke of a pen goes, well, we'll just close off this area also. I'm extremely concerned about it. So if you've got any feedback, I'd love to hear it. And then I'll ask another question.
I'll just make one comment, Brian. Thank you for that information and your background and clearly your knowledge of that area. And I would encourage you to look out for information related to the LT Murray and the WENAS wildlife area planning process that we're about to start. The LT Murray already had their management plan, but we're going to be doing travel management for both of those areas together. So we've gone through quite an intensive inventory process to try to get absolutely everything on the map that's out there on the landscape so that we have a good kind of base from which to discuss all of these things. So this will be discussed. We're going to have public scoping meetings, in the next 6 months, probably even sooner, hopefully by early summer. And then, with our wildlife area advisory committee and multiple public meetings and opportunity to give input in this. And we're kind of excited about what we're going to do in that area because we're going to have a public participatory online format, so that the public can go in and actually make comments about specific routes or segments and that kind of thing. So we definitely would love to hear from you during that whole process, especially with your knowledge.
And Brian, did you say you have one more question?
Yeah, I do. I'm curious as to, I've got lots of questions. Okay. I'm pretty active in this because I just watch roads get closed, they get gated off. Like the backside of the observatory coming up from the WENAS. It was supposed to be a 1-year temporary gate because there was a fire there, like 10, 12 years ago, and it's permanent. And the more access that you cut off to people, the more heavily used and abused the areas are that are open. And as a guy that goes to all these meetings all over the county, trying his best to keep access open to the hills for my family and for generations to come, that doesn't mean driving up a paved road to watch the sunset someplace. That's actually being able to go someplace where it's, kind of rugged and maybe hard to get to, and not everybody can go there. And to see these areas get totally shut off that were supposed to be temporary is kind of upsetting. And I don't know who to talk to other than the budget person that goes, well, we don't have money to keep this open anymore, so we're just going to keep the gate locked. And but I'm definitely interested in trying to find out somehow to get in touch with the travel management plan for the LT Murray and WENAS area. I just live a stone's throw from those roads, so I would love to try to be involved and try to give some input to help this out.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Maybe Brian, if you could put your contact information if you want in the chat, or if you can let us know how we can look to you to make sure you get included on those mailing lists.
Heidi, I did put in the lands at wdfw.wa.gov email
Okay, good.
address. So just for those, we have 9 raised hands currently in the chat plus the 1. So if we don't get to your question, please send it to that email address so we can follow up with you. And so Brian, if you could send your, the contact information you would like to, so that you can be included into that, we would appreciate
And do I send that to the lands at DFW website? Okay.
That is correct.
Great. Okay, thank you. I'll do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
All right. Next up we have is Brian H. I'm going to transfer that over. Brian, can you hear me? Oh,
Oh, can you hear me?
yes, I can hear
Super.
you.
Thank you. I know we're running short on time, so I'll try to be quick. I'm a lifetime resident of Washington. My family raised me here because we love the outdoors. I've raised my family here because we love the outdoors. I think it's the greatest asset the state has. We use it in motorized manners, non-motorized manners, every opportunity we get, which is often. So I care greatly about our natural resources here and our access to them. I echo Nicole's concerns that I have not seen nor heard a lot of evidence-based support for why this change needs to be made. And most of the support that has been given is largely anecdotal. And most of the anecdotes I'm hearing in the previous meeting as well sound like it's unlawful use of these areas that is really causing the harm. And so my question, maybe this is to the captain, is if that's all the evidence that's been presented so far says that's the case, in which case it sounds like more of an enforcement issue. And so if your challenge is enforcing, a million acres of, the laws on a million acres of land today, what's going to change if we change the rules in your ability to enforce those laws tomorrow, given that nothing else is going to change, I don't think. It just seems like a really strong posture to suggest that people breaking the law today are going to cause us to, by default, lose access to taxpayer funded land. But that's because people are unlawfully using it rather than lawful use causing harm. So hopefully that makes sense. Appreciate your thoughts.
Yeah, it does make sense. And I appreciate the question because I think it's a good question. I think it's a fair question. And to a certain extent, you're correct. A lot of the issues that we deal with out there on the landscape are because of unlawful use. But there's two kinds of violators, right? Well, there's more than two, but for the purpose of this example, I'm going to divide them into two. There's the people who are intentionally violating the law, which I think hopefully everybody on here can agree certainly deserves some enforcement action. But then you have people out there who inadvertently violate the law, and they do so because maybe the law is not clear, maybe the management processes that we have in place aren't as effective as we'd like them to be, or maybe, and this is a big one, which has been mentioned a couple times, because we do a lot of management through posted regulation, and the posted regulations get ripped down. And then the public doesn't understand what the laws are. And that creates a lot of challenges for law enforcement because we don't want to enforce the law. We don't want to take some sort of enforcement action against a citizen who didn't have any way of knowing that they violated the law, if that makes sense. And so what hopefully this process that we're working through will make it much clearer for people who are out there recreating on our lands and using motorized recreation to know what is allowed and what isn't allowed. So at least you take that group of people who are inadvertently violating the law and they're no longer doing that. And that cuts way back on the amount of unlawful use or illegal use that we see out there. Now, we're going to continue to address illegal use no matter what. And as you know, there's not a lot of us to go around, so we have some challenges there as well. But we're never going to be able to regulate away unlawful use. All we can do is, we're never going to be able to manage away unlawful use. We have to have an enforcement component to do that. And this particular process hopefully will strengthen our ability to enforce the laws that are out there and our road management and just travel management plans in our wildlife areas. So I hope that answers your question because you're right. Unlawful use isn't going to go away. We're going to continue to have to deal with that. But what we're trying to do is make it more clear for the users so they're not inadvertently violating and give our enforcement officers a little bit more tools in the toolbox to take enforcement action when they have to.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. I appreciate that. And I just would dovetail that with, I fully agree with everything you said. And I guess my question, which maybe in the interest of time can be rhetorical, is why can't we do all of that, like increased signage and communication around what is available and what's correct and lawful without by default removing access to all of these areas? Because it seems like those two things don't have to go together, and it doesn't seem like one serves the other. I fully agree having clear articulation of regulations and rules and what can be enforced and improving that would be better for all of us, including I think some of the other commenters here too, that would probably help their issues too. I'm unclear why we need to by default remove access for all of these uses to also then accomplish that.
Well, and that's a great question, and I don't understand this process as to be one that's going to eliminate or remove access. I think that most of this process is going to confirm the access that we already have out there on our lands, with some exceptions, right? Because there is unlawful access that's already occurring. And one of the things that I was thinking about, actually, with some of the previous comments that were made is, it only, I mean, we've all heard the expression, it only takes one bad apple to ruin the bunch, right? And unfortunately, you have a lot of recreational users that get impacted because a small minority of people choose to violate the law. And we're not using that as a reason here to remove access or eliminate access. That's not the intent of this. The intent of this is just have a little bit better control over the access that already exists out there, so we don't increase the unlawful activity beyond what may already be occurring. And if anybody has another perspective, feel free to jump in. But I just want to re-clarify, this process is not to remove access. It's just to help us manage the access that we already have in a much more successful way.
Yeah, thank you. Totally appreciate that. And again, I know you have a really hard job to do. I think that the way it's written, the way I understand it is by default access is removed and then only allowed where explicitly said it is allowed. Whereas today, I believe it's the opposite. By default, you have access to these areas and they're areas you're supposed to stay within. But that's my concern is the intent. I totally agree with you and believe everybody here has the same intent. But when it's written the way it is, the intent and the result may end up being different. And I think that's why some of us are on this call today. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so I think we have time for one more question. And then I have 7 other hands up. So if those 7 hands could please email their question to that Lance email in the chat, we'd greatly appreciate it because we want to make sure you are heard in this process. And then the chat questions that have been submitted, I'm also recording those so that we can follow up with you. Last is Matthew Mead. Matthew, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so I'm a snowmobiler living here in Central Washington, Yakima area. So my concern is about losing access. So I guess my question is, we're talking about changing a WAC and we're talking about drawing maps. Are the maps going to be out before the WACs are changed? Because I don't want to find myself in a position where I'm having to fight to get land back that was taken away from me. So what's the timeline on that?
I can answer that, and I think Captain Joel, can also follow up a little bit. But we are working as quickly as possible with our wildlife area managers and our regional program managers to get things mapped. And we do have these travel management planning processes, which do take significant amounts of time to go through all of the review, internal, external, the public meetings and that kind of thing. So we will be doing temporary designations just based on internal review. And that is something that will then hold until we go through the full travel management process on any given wildlife area. So, and then Captain Jewel, I know that we've talked a little bit about just kind of the enforcement perspective, like when there's a time lapse, between what we can show on our maps enforcing this whack.
Yeah, and just thank you, Heidi, and I appreciate the question. I'm not surprised to hear that there's a general consensus that the concern is loss of access. This is not a quick process, as you can all probably imagine. And anytime we make a change with any of our regulations, from an enforcement perspective, we start with a high degree of education. Our goal is to go out there and make sure that everybody's aware of the rule change, aware of the new regulations, the new laws. And so we approach it with a pretty gentle enforcement action. And then as time goes on and people get more familiar with the rules, and there's obviously a lot more notification, a lot more information available, and we see higher compliance rates, we start to take a little bit stronger enforcement action. But none of this is going to happen overnight. It's a long process figuring out how they want to apply these road or these travel management plans. So I don't know if that helps to answer your question or not. I mean, I don't know that. I don't know the specific timeline. Somebody else on here might have a better idea of that, because there's a lot of moving parts to this.
I would just
Can you still
add,
hear me?
I would add that we are, for those areas where we do have the most amount of use, like Region 3 as a whole, is one area we're focusing on, to try to get our designations, decided upon and out to the public. So, yeah, we'll be working as quickly as possible with those areas where we know that this is going to be more of an issue.
Can you hear me? Okay, so I'm not quite fully clarified here. So is the WAC going to be implemented before the maps are done? Yes or no?
It depends on the area, and there will be some areas that have the maps before the WAC likely, and there will be some areas where likely the WAC comes out before the maps.
And those are the places where Captain Joe looked like you were about to say. I was going to say where enforcement will be focused on education.
Yeah, because obviously if we change the WAC, but we don't have a travel management plan for a particular wildlife area that clearly outlines what's open and what's not, then we're not going to enforce any differently than we currently do, which is essentially by posted regulation. So on your given wildlife area, even though the WAC may change before the plan is complete and the maps are published, nothing will change until that process is done. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it answers my question. I'm not sure honestly, I don't think a WAC should be changed until it's done everywhere. Again, because if you draw the map and we don't like it and it ends up in court, we've lost access during that time. But hey, okay, I do appreciate you guys responding.
Okay, so we are out of time. It is now just past 5. Heidi, I have asked everyone to send their email or questions to lands@wdfw.wa.gov. So hopefully when you get a chance, those questions come in, you can get a chance to recall. Again, this is a public meeting. We have not filed a CR 102. We're still in the process of proposing that draft language and going through those process. At the beginning of this chat, I had put the link to the rulemaking page for this project. So please keep an eye on that. Any additional informational resources, or the next step up, all of that information will be housed there. So please keep an eye to continue on to know where the status is of this rule project. I want to thank each of my panelists for joining today, and I want to thank each of my participants for coming, because it takes all of us to help move this process and to actually hear all sides of the story, because sometimes we do need to hear that. So, Heidi, do you have any last minute thoughts?
I just want to reiterate that I'm very appreciative of all of you that came to listen and participate, and those of you that were able to give your comments. And I really encourage anybody to send comments, to the address that Jamie gave out, and also comment when we do file our CO 102 on our public input page. Joel,
All right.
do you have anything?
Yeah, just to build on that, there's still a lot of time in this process and opportunity for people to weigh in and provide input and feedback. Um, we welcome that. We want that. We want your critiques. We want you to, poke holes in this and help us make it better. So thanks for joining us at sort of the beginning of that process.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and end this public meeting. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.